Good morning. Welcome to the last day of our budget hearings. We thank you so much for joining us this morning. This morning we are glad to be joined by Pennsylvania's Auditor General, Tim DeFore, who will talk about his work at the Auditor General's office, and then we'll commence with questions from the members. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, any introductory comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome to the last day of budget hearings. Welcome, Auditor General and your team. Appreciate you being here. Before we begin, I just want to lay out the budget numbers so everyone understands what we're talking about. Your agency request is $48 million roughly, and the governor has mirrored that request, an increase of $2.1 million or 5.2%. So we look forward to the discussion this morning and welcome you all here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. General, if you would start by introducing the folks at the table with you. Once you do that, we will swear everyone in.
To my immediate left, we have Mike Richard, Deputy for Administration, and over to my right, we have Gordon Denlinger, Deputy Auditor General for Audits.
Thank you. If you all stand so we can swear you in. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. I do want to make mention that the gentleman, Mr. Denlinger, is no stranger to this chamber, having served, how long did you serve, Gordon?
6 months.
Having served 6 terms in this General Assembly. So glad to have you back in the People's House. Auditor General, I'm told you have an introductory statement that you'd like to make.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Harris, Chairman Struzzi, and members of the House Appropriations Committee for the opportunity to present the Department of Auditor General's 2025-2026 fiscal year budget request. As I begin my second term, I remain dedicated to serving Pennsylvania taxpayers who expect accountability, integrity, public service, and transparency from their state government and their state officials. In continuing to do this work, I would like to thank this committee for your continued belief in our vision for the Department of the Auditor General. Since I've been in office, you have helped us restore the department's budget, and it has improved our work significantly. We have held ourselves accountable the same way we hold others accountable. We're also transparent, the same way we recommend others be transparent. Our department has become more efficient and productive by utilizing auditing and accounting best practices and introducing risk-based audit procedures such as limited procedure engagements and reduced period engagements, and obtaining auditing software, making our work papers 100% paperless. In my first term, we produced approximately 14,000 audits for an average of 3,500 audits per year. But our work is far from over. We are seeking a modest 5% increase to our budget, which will help us honor employee contractual obligations and allow us to continue our mission. I look forward to working with you, your fellow members, and your respective staffs during this important process. Thank you again for your partnership, and please know my door is always open.
Thank you, General. I'd like to remind everybody, pull the mics as close to you as possible so we can make sure everyone hears. In addition, in the middle is our timekeeper. When it is green, members will commence with their questions. They will have 5 minutes to ask questions. When it's yellow, that means that there's 30 seconds left in their time, and when it's red, we would ask that you would conclude your comments so that we can proceed to the next member and get as many questions as possible. We will begin this morning with Representative Friel.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, General DeFore. Thank you for coming before our committee today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about. One of my favorite things to read late at night are audits, so thank you. So I do want to quote, and I think one of the important missions that you do is the audit function when we're talking about budget. And you have a recent audit, and I want to read some information from that audit on cyber charters. Specifically in your a recent audit of 5 PA cyber charter schools, you found that schools improved financial position by accruing fund balances that increased $365 million, or 144%, from 254 up to over 620 or $619 million as of June 2023, which could be considered excessive for public schools, quoting your document. And we believe these fund issues is the outcome of the charter schools law funding formula, which raises important questions about the need for a more reasonable, logical approach to funding. With these high balances, we also found that some schools acquire a lot of real estate and have moved from the fund balances, and specifically the Commonwealth Charter Academy, $354 million from its general fund to its capital projects fund to purchase or renovate 21 buildings. This could be considered uncommon for a public cyber charter school. So I'd like to ask you, in addition to just the unusual amount of money that's taxpayer dollars moving into these charter schools, are you aware of any reason that cyber charter schools would be acquiring that amount of real estate with taxpayer dollars?
No, we don't. Again, one of the ways that happened is because legally it could happen. Because when you look at the funding formula and you look at our current laws with regards to cyber charter schools, how they're funded, it allowed for this excess to occur. And one of the things that we continue to talk about in our audits, and this audit in particular, what is the cost to educate a child? What is a reasonable cost to educate a child? And we discovered that because of the old funding formula, which was created in, I believe, in 2002, that funding formula no longer works. That issue was also brought to light by one of my predecessors, Jack Wagner, in 2015, where he said the same thing. My predecessor also said the same thing. So to answer your question, the reason why all this happened, why it could happen, and I want to say it happened legally, because we're using an outdated funding formula.
Thank you. And I found it really interesting. Now, in these cyber charters and charter funding, would it be surprising to learn that over the last few years, when public schools, our bricks and mortar public schools, had an average fund balance as of 2023 of 18%, which is just about where the Gatsby, just above where the recommended fund balance for assigned and unassigned. At that same period of time, from 2013 to 2023, our charter schools grew from 15% up to 40% fund balances across the state. Does that seem like an unusually high fund balance to be carrying for?
Well, as far as, and you talked about the growth of cyber charter schools, and one of the things, and we also know that this in our audit, cyber charter schools really started to grow during the COVID pandemic. And of course, when you grow at the rate that they were growing because of the COVID pandemic, your revenues are also going to increase. However, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. Just because you grow doesn't necessarily mean that your expenses have to grow at a rate that is normally, which is not normal, and not according to how other cyber charter schools are growing. So the bottom line is, even though these schools have grown, let me go back to the formula, what is the actual cost to educate a child while maintaining enough in your reserves just in case of emergency?
And final question is, are you aware of any correlation between the growth in the funding for the cyber charters or charter schools, their accumulation of fund balances, and their academic performance? And I'll quote here from the Future Ready Index, where in mathematics and algebra, CCA has a 4.7% proficiency. English language arts, 11% for proficiency. Biology, science, 13% proficiency. So these are quite low numbers, some of the lowest in academic performance. Seems strange that we would have such low performing schools with such high dollar amounts not being used for instruction, but being accumulated in fund balances and real estate acquisitions.
Yeah, and I think that would be a better question for the Department of Education.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mustela.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Welcome, General DeFore. I just want to ask just some basic questions about the latitude you have when it comes to audits. By law, what are you required to audit, and what can you audit?
Well, basically, we can audit, in most of the cases, wherever state funds are being used, we can audit that.
At whose request, may I interrupt you? Sorry.
It could be at anybody's request. It could be
Okay.
at your request. Could come from the governor's office. It could come from a member of the administration. It could be based on something that we've audited in the past that we're just following up on. It could come from the general public. So there's no limitations on who can request an audit. But when that happens, the first thing that we do is we have to determine, one, can we perform the audit? Because there are some limitations on what we can and what we can do. As I stated, we audit state funds and also federal funds that go through the Treasurer's office and then are dispersed. We can audit that as well. One of the things that we can audit, we can't audit funds coming directly from the federal government to a State Department or any other governmental entity.
So it has to come through the pass-through through the state?
It has to come to the pass-through, that's correct.
Okay, okay. And by law, which departments or which agencies are you required to audit then? Are there specific ones or specific departments, specific organizations that you must audit by law?
Well, pretty much most state departments that receive state funding.
What's that?
Pretty much most state departments that receive state funding. The only way we wouldn't be able to audit them is if there's something written in the law that states the Auditor General shall not audit this, or that another entity or group shall audit these funds.
So you can do multiple agencies at a time. The reason I ask is just an example. I've been on the committee now for a couple years, and I've seen a lot of line items in different agencies, budget requests for workforce development programs, whatever they have through DCED, LNI, agriculture, education. It seems like every department has a workforce development line item. And my question to you is, would this be something you can audit at the same time to maybe come up?
Potentially.
I'm sorry?
Potentially. But something like that, again, we would have to have that conversation because, as I stated, there are some things, even though it's state funds, there are some things that we can't audit by law.
That you can't?
That we cannot.
That you cannot audit.
So before I would commit to doing an audit like that, and I would love to have that conversation, we would first, once we get the audit request, we would have to determine, can we do this? Are we legally entitled to do this? Because even if we're not legally entitled to do it, if we say we're going to ignore the law, we're going to audit it anyway, whoever we're auditing doesn't have to cooperate.
Because a lot of this would be state money. I mean,
yes.
so it would be.
Exactly. So the way that you laid it out, it sounds as if that's something that we could possibly do. And after the hearings are over, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about it if you have some concerns.
So it would be a request from somebody to do this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, fine. Yeah, I mean, I just, when I look through all of this, so you can do multiple agencies then at one time? Like just, again, for example, the ones that I mentioned.
Yeah, we can do multiple agencies at one time as long as we have the manpower to do it. But yes.
And about how long do those normally take?
It depends. I mean,
Okay.
some audits may take 8 months. Others may take 18 months. So it just depends on the amount of work that needs to be done in performing the audit.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we want to do, and we don't necessarily, we try to have our audits completed in a timely manner. But one of the things that we want to do, once the audits are complete, we want to make sure that we produce a quality audit report.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
Right. And just real quickly, would these audits be a financial audit and a performance audit as well, or is it just?
It would have to be one or another.
It would be what?
Be one or another, because
okay.
financial audits and performance audits are two different things. Financial audits, you follow a very strict set of guidelines. Performance audits, you try to follow that same guideline, but because of the policies and standards and regulations regarding an entity that you're auditing, that you're doing a performance audit, you have to follow those as well. So,
Okay,
so
great.
there's two very different types of paths. that you
Right,
have to
and I
take
didn't know
within
if your office does that, you know, kind of going in separate ways with the multiple agencies and the multiple audits too. So that's all. Thank you so much, Auditor, or Mr. General, and thanks, Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, good morning. Good morning to the Deputy Generals. Always nice to see you all. Wanted to go in a little different direction and talk about an industry trend that very well may affect your department. The CPA pipeline in the state of Pennsylvania and actually in the United States has been outpacing demand. The supply has been underpacing demand, I should say, for new CPAs. And some of my CPA colleagues in the House and Senate are working on some legislation to try to modernize some of the professional requirements and the educational requirements. And I wanted to hear your perspective on the issue, how it might affect your department, and any thoughts you might have.
Well, and that's a very good question, because that affects us in everything that we do. When I started out as Auditor General, we had 43 certified public accountants, but through retirements, we now have 34. Wow. And we're not, state government isn't the only industry that is suffering with the lack of certified public accountants. The entire Commonwealth is. And the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants is well aware of this. Now, one of the things that is happening in the accounting and individuals going for the CPA, some other states, and I'm going to talk about our neighbor to the west, Ohio, have changed some of their standards. And they've changed their standards from where you have to take 150 credit hours in college with a concentration in accounting just to sit for the CPA exam. Most kids don't want to be in college for 5 years. So one of the things that the state of Ohio has done, and what others have done, they've added another pathway. They have that pathway, but they've added another one. And that other pathway is where if you graduate with a 4-year degree with a concentration in accounting, and if you have 2 years of experience, you can then sit for the CPA exam. Another pathway is if you either in your undergrad or obtaining a master's degree, if you have a concentration in Ohio, excuse me, a concentration in accounting, you could have 1 year of experience and sit for the CPA exam. The CPA exam itself hasn't changed. They've created a new pathway, an easier pathway to take the CPA exam. And the reason why Ohio's done it, I believe Illinois has done it, and some of our neighboring states have done it, is because they see the decrease in the number of certified public accountants. And this is just my own personal theory, by doing what Ohio is doing, if we adopted that here in Pennsylvania, that would help tremendously. And that was something I would definitely support.
And that's almost exactly what we're looking to do, in addition to some of the other tweaks with, timing on and this would be a regulatory thing, but timing on the length of time to take the CPA exam as well, which, hopefully would also help that in the workforce. And along those lines, would this affect your intern to hire program, or could that be baked into some of this, or is that?
That possibly could be. So what the intern to hire program is if a student who is either graduated from a community college or is at a 4-year institution, if you are accepted into an intern to hire program, And after you complete the intern to hire program, the one thing that you're going to have with us is a job. So we created the intern to hire program with things like that in mind. What is the best way for us to build for our future? Like a lot of other state departments, right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, 40% of our staff could walk out today because they have more than 20 years of service. And that's something that we're going to be dealing with from now until my time is over. Great. And that's something that I feel that needs to be addressed. Because if we're going to continue to do the work that we're doing and doing it in a timely manner, we need bodies.
Well, thank you. This sounds great, and I look forward to collaborating on these things to help the entire profession as a whole. So thanks again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Auditor General DeFore, thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it. Couple quick questions for you. During the governor's budget address on February 4th, he stated that he directed the budget secretary to conduct a comprehensive review of every program we offer in the Commonwealth to identify inefficiencies and costs that can be eliminated. This initiative, as you might already know, is the REMAP program that he talked about, is incorporated into the budget proposal by sunsetting programs that are duplicative and don't work. It's my understanding that your office was not part of the initial review for that, and have you had conversations with the governor and the budget secretary regarding the future involvement in that review?
No, I don't believe we have.
Okay. I mean, it seems like we're bringing like $1.2 billion new initiatives this year. Your office would be the one to talk to about that. Going back to the previous question, I think Representative Mostello asked, have you conducted an internal review of programs that your office oversees to date? And if so, what areas have you identified that would be inefficient to help out in this remap to deliver the desired results? And could you commit to such a review?
Well, one of the things that, and I said this during my introduction, is that during my first term, we produced 14,000 audits, and for an average of 3,500 audits per year. And a lot of those, and with those thousands of audits that we do every year, are thousands of recommendations. So in part, what we're doing is we are looking at government efficiencies. We are making recommendations on how government can improve, and we offer those recommendations to whomever we're auditing, including the governor's office.
And have they been receptive to that?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. And the reason why I say that is because we haven't been made aware of any pieces of legislation that have come down with regards to some of the audits that we have that we've performed.
No, I think it would be wise to take the recommendations from your organization. I mean, in the next couple of years, the IFO has not painted a pretty picture of the financial situation. We're going to be flipping couch cushions soon, looking for change. So any little help in that manner definitely be heeded.
I agree.
Well, that was my only question, sir. I appreciate you coming out, and no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Auditor General, nice to see you again. Thank you for being here, along with your staff. Really do appreciate all the work that you do. I'm going to jump right into my question. Last year, the House passed a piece of legislation that I authored, or that I sponsored rather, House Bill 1379, which would have provided a special ad hoc retirement adjustment between $75 and $300 per month for qualifying retired police and firefighters. Unfortunately, the Senate majority did not go for that legislation last year. It stopped in their chamber and didn't move any further. And a lot of our retired police and firefighters are really counting on that movement of the legislation to help them out. especially with the rising costs that have been occurring, not just last year, this year, we're seeing it, and a lot of these members of our community haven't seen an adjustment in their retirement pension for quite some time. As a department that administers the municipal pension state aid program, do you know the last time that the state provided a special ad hoc retirement adjustment?
I believe it was at least 20 years ago,
20 years.
at least.
More generally, can you talk about your role in administering the municipal pension state aid program and auditing municipal pension plans?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is that we offer support to our volunteer fire relief associations. And with regards to equipment, but also with regards to their pension plans. And one of our responsibilities is to make sure that those funds which have strings attached to them, they're supposed to be spent a certain way, making sure that those funds are being spent the way that they're supposed to be spent. So we provide funding, but then we go back and we audit the funding. In addition, one of the things that we've also have done is that we have met with volunteer firefighters in different parts of the state, talking about their responsibility and giving them not necessarily audit advice, but offering them recommendations on how to improve what they can do with regards to their own oversight. And it's most appreciative, but that's pretty much our role, to provide the funding, but also to make sure that it's spent correctly, and to answer any questions or have any concerns, or answer any questions with regards to any concerns that they may have.
I appreciate that. What are the audits revealing of the financial health of the municipal pension systems that you're doing the audits on?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What are the audits revealing about the financial health of the municipal pension systems that you're auditing? What are you seeing across the board?
So one of the things that I'm seeing, and I'm going to go back a few years, where initially when we first started looking at these, when I first came on board, 33% of our municipal pension plans were in some type of distress. Then came COVID, and after COVID, when a lot of these local municipalities received funding, COVID dollars, that 33% went down to about 22. But now we're starting to see an increase. And one of the things that that we're constantly looking at is in talking to volunteer firefighters and talking to law enforcement about is putting in, number one, putting in their required minimum contribution. This is something that they're required to do by law. And the reason why it's so important is because if they miss a payment, that's going to hurt. That's going to show up. And what we've learned is that some of these organizations, if they may have a good year of investing, they may say, you know what, this year we don't necessarily need to put in our required contribution. But what they don't understand is that eventually things level off. So we are constantly talking about making sure that they put in their required contribution. That's the number one thing. And another thing, and even though this isn't necessarily something that we do, but something that I have on my wish list, is look at what are they investing in? Are they investing in things where you could actually index it, or things that aren't risky? Or are they investing in things that are risky? As a municipality, we should be investing, well, they should be investing as a prudent investor.
I appreciate your answer on that. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate your staff as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Alsomer.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Attorney General DeFore, thank you for being here today, and team. I look forward to your testimony. In 2021, your office announced its transformation initiative to modernize its operations to better serve taxpayers. This initiative performed a top-down review of your office's operations with the intention of looking for opportunities to opt continual process improvements where the department could. Can you provide the committee with an update on how those initiatives turned out and what you found?
And I appreciate that. And that initiative is something that's going to be it's going to be ongoing. So what we decided to do is to look at, number one, what the employees needed to be successful. Number two, how are we doing our work? Number three, what were the bureaus doing? How are the bureaus doing their work? Did we have the technology in order to do the work that we needed to do in an efficient way? Were our employees were they given the proper resources to be not only for training, but given the opportunity to advance their education? So we looked at everything, starting with the employees, and did a holistic review of the department from top to bottom. And here's what came out of that. Number one, the employees felt that they needed the proper computers to do the work. Some didn't. So we got them new computers, got them 2 new monitors. They also wanted to be trained. So we started a workforce development team. Workforce development team's responsibility was to make sure that each employee was trained, but also if they want to advance their career, make sure that they had the proper training to do that. We also started to recruit from every PASSHE school in Pennsylvania. When I say we, I paid those visits too. Talked to PASSHE students, talked to professors, talked to administrators about careers within the Department of Auditor General. Every state-related school. We visited our 2 historically black colleges, both Lincoln and Cheney. We visited and offered career opportunities for the first time ever to students at community colleges. We opened up new career pathways for those students. We became very aggressive with regards to how we recruit. We introduced best practices that were actually being used by the private sector. We brought those into state government. You heard me mention about reduced period engagement, limited procedure engagements. Those were all practices that were done by the private sector. We modernized our auditing technology to where we have auditing software that that organizes all our auditing work papers, which is now 100%. So those, and I may miss a few, but in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we've done. So we needed to take a look at everything that we were doing within the department to see if we could be doing it better and to see how that possibly could be done. And we also have a position that's a transformation officer. Their duty, their role and responsibility is to make sure that we are constantly improving. Because what we are doing today may not work next year. So let's get ahead of the curve so we can be a trendsetter for other states. In some cases, we have been.
So I was glad to hear you're recruiting from PASSHE schools. As a PASSHE graduate myself from East Stroudsburg University, I'm just curious, how did that turn out? Do you have any kind of results on that?
It turned out very well. And you heard me talk about the intern to hire program. Most of the students that entered that program and graduated from that program are from PASSHE schools. Our very first intern to hire was from Westchester.
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. I see it's yellow down there, so Mr. Chairman, I'm going to finish my questions. Thank you. Thank you, Auditor General. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Young.
Good morning, Auditor General.
Morning.
And team. Happy Women's History Month.
Yes.
Although it's 3 men sitting there. I just want to note that. 2 questions for you. Efficiency and debt level. Your budget documents note that over 70% of the audits you complete are required by the statute. are there statutorily required audits that we need to re-examine because they are duplicative, too frequent, or are there any other reasons?
Thank you for that question. That's something that has been in my mind for quite some time. And actually, I think that number is closer to 80%. So I'm going to go back to when I was Dauphin County Controller. And when I was Dauphin County Controller, I used to butt heads with the Auditor General. The reason being, there's a lot of work that I felt we were duplicating efforts. And those pretty much were audits where we were auditing counties, where we were auditing district justices, we were auditing county law offices. We were looking at the same thing, although they were looking at county dollars, but we were looking at state dollars. But aside from that, we were looking at the same thing, getting the same information from the same individuals or the same bank accounts. So I kind of felt that there was a easier way for us to work together in order to do that, to be more efficient. And that's something I had visited every controller in the Commonwealth over the past year and a half. And those are some of the things that we've talked about. So we are already talking about what is it that we need to do in order for county controllers and the Auditor General's office to work together and to be more efficient, because right now, in some areas, we're just duplicating our efforts.
Thank you for that. And so as it relates to the debt level, each year, the department certifies the amount of outstanding debt and compares it to both the 5-year average of the tax revenue for the overall constitutional limit on debt. Can you share these figures with us?
So the one figure that I can share is that the Commonwealth's current debt is a little over $10 billion. As far as the specifics of it, I believe the governor's office and the Office of the Budget is coming later this afternoon, so they may be able to provide more information.
Okay. And do you know how our debt level here in PA compares to the other states?
Unfortunately, no, I do not.
Okay. And do you know if it's viewed negatively by credit rating agencies, our debt level?
That's something that either the state treasurer or the Department of the Budget would have.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to also go on record that your office has always been a welcome and willing partner in the work as we're trying to educate our constituents more about the process of your office, and then also as it relates to your financial literacy programming that we're looking to bring to different areas of the Commonwealth, specifically to the 185th. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General DeFore, thank you for being here. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention and give a shout out to your ledge director, John Hershey, a former colleague of mine. We were classmates. We came in together. It's great to see him working with you. He's done a great job for you on behalf of your office, and I wanted to make sure I let you know it from here.
I appreciate that.
Publicly say it. So, hey, in 2022, your department or your office announced that you were going to be giving school audits to PDE, basically transferring that function to PDE. And it's not something that you're constitutionally required to audit. And I was curious, since then, could you tell us about the savings that your office has seen and how that is going?
Well, as far as what the savings are, as far as when we closed the Bureau of School Audits, we transferred those resources to other departments. One of those being performance audits, which is the bureau that now audits schools. But going back to your question with regards to closing of the Bureau of School Audits, the reason why we closed it wasn't working. It was not working. What we were doing was basically duplicating the work that the Department of Education was already doing. And you may have heard me talk about transformation, changing the office, looking at our internal processes and procedures. When we did that, that's when we identified we were duplicating the work that the Department of Education is doing. So what we decided to do was to put those resources that were then with the Bureau of School Audits, put them into performance audits, and the results are some of the things that you're now seeing with regards to us auditing schools. So even though the Bureau of School Audits was closed, we never stopped auditing schools. So there really wasn't a savings, but it helped us in other areas.
Understood, but what costs were involved annually when you were doing the audits of the schools?
I believe that was 4.8 million.
4.8 million. And so you're still doing some sort of audit within the schools right now?
Yeah, and we've never stopped, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so, and keep in mind, when I prior to me taking office, there were 3 bureaus that did school audits. There was Bureau of Special Investigations, that was disbanded prior to me getting here. There's the Bureau of School Audits. The Bureau of School Audits, prior to me getting here, had 120 auditors. When I got here, had 46. So to be more efficient, and also the Bureau of Performance Audits. So to be more efficient with regards to audit schools, but also perform audits that were more impactful, we moved all those resources to Bureau of Performance Audits.
How long was it taking to perform a school audit before 2022?
I don't exactly know how long it was taking, but one of the things that I can tell you is that the information that the Bureau of School Audits was doing then was old, useless information that was up to between 5 and 7 years old.
Okay. Mr. DeFore, General DeFore, excuse me, thank you for being here. Thank you for the good work that you and your office are doing. And make sure you keep taking care of our guy, John Hershey. All right,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, General DeFore. It's always good to see you. Pleasure.
Likewise.
Can't wait to have you back in Pittsburgh sometime soon. And for your staff, thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it. So I want to just ask a question. In the governor's proposed budget, he proposed to fund your request for a 5% increase, or equivalent to about $2.2 million. So could you tell us, is there a particular bureau with a higher number of vacancies than others, and which vacancies would you prioritize in filling with this proposed budget increase?
We have vacancies in all of them. And as I stated earlier today, we talked about our recruitment efforts. We talked about the number of CPAs that we've lost. So there isn't one single department where we don't need staff.
Gotcha. So I want to switch gears to performance audits. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but you all have a hotline for the public to submit concerns for consideration. Can you tell us, is that effective? Is it used, and does it actually lead to you actually doing any performance audits?
It is used. It is used, and it has led us to do some audits. But it definitely does work, and it's one of just several ways in which the community or any citizens of Pennsylvania, some outside the state, can reach us. So one of the things that we try to do, we try to make it easier for anybody to reach us if they have a concern, and that hotline is just one of them.
Do you see like an increase in activities to the hotline over the years, or is it pretty steady?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but if you'd like, I can get you that information.
Sure. Cool. Sounds good. And then lastly, staying on the conversation of audits, you conduct audits anywhere from interstate water commissions to municipal accounts, from department programs to the courts. Is there a specific sector that stands out to you as facing more financial hardships than others?
Pensions. And the reason being is, as I stated a few minutes ago, we're starting to see an increase of pension plans that are in some type of distress. And that's either municipality or a police and fire or non-uniform pension plans. And that number is starting to increase, and that, for me, has something that's always been concerning.
Gotcha. That's all that I have. Thank you, Mr. DeFore. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, welcome, Auditor General DeFore. Thank you for being with us. So the governor's proposed budget authorizes a complement of 412 positions, and your budget request was for 412 positions in order to meet the statewide auditing demands. According to documentation presented to the committee, your office has filled 374 positions as of February 17th, 2025. Meaning that in the next fiscal year, you're looking to hopefully add those additional 38 positions, which you need. So your current budget request of $2.193 million to cover personnel and operational costs to meet salary increases and fill the vacancies, can you confirm that this is going to be enough to meet that need?
For this year's budget?
Yes.
If we meet that request, yes. My hope is that we exceed it. But if we meet that request, that should be enough.
Now, does that 5% increase include salary increases for your current complement, along with salary and benefit packages for the additional 38 individuals your office needs?
Yes, it does.
It does. At this time, do you expect to see an increase in your 2026-27 budget proposal, should your office fulfill this full complement?
If we meet the benchmarks for this year's budget, we probably will see an increase in next year's budget.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit, and you've talked about the need for our pension plans that are in distress. And in fact, you mentioned that 33% of them are in some sort of distress. And you gave us some recommendations as to how to work with the municipalities, which I appreciate. Act 53 of 2022 changed the way the insurance premiums tax revenue is annually allocated and deposited into the Fire Insurance Tax Fund and Municipal Pension Aid Fund. This change in the program's funding mechanism was created to ensure each fund would receive stability in the amount of monies it received every year. So can you summarize for the committee how your department is statutorily required to allocate funding to each municipality?
Well, thank you for the question, but what that law does, it gives us a floor. It gives us a starting point to where we then determine the amount of money that we're going to allocate to whatever, to whoever needs to receive it. So, but as far as how we do it hasn't changed, but the law does give us a floor with regards to where to start.
Okay, and along that same line, can you provide an update on how Act 53 was rolled out by your department, as well as how it affected the stability of the two funds?
So could you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
So can you provide an update on how Act 53 was rolled out by your department, as well as how it affected the two funds, meaning the pension plans of the municipal departments and then also the volunteer fire relief associations?
I'm going to defer that to Gordon Denley, your Deputy Auditor General.
Thank you, General. We do not have that in front of us at this time. We're going to need to provide that to your office.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. That's all I have, Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Bellman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here. General DeFore, I want to talk a little bit about your Be Money Smart financial literacy initiative. Can you just talk a little bit about the program and what partners you work with?
Well, thank you for asking that question. That's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. That we've done in the office. It's a initiative to bring awareness to financial literacy. And I don't mind saying it right here. It's my hope, my belief that one day financial literacy would be taught in every school in Pennsylvania from kindergarten through 12th grade. Because it's about preparing the next generation. The more knowledge that somebody graduating from high school has when they go out to the real world, either have a job, go into the military, want to buy a house, take out a student loan, buy a car, they're going to need to understand how money works. No matter what you do, you're going to need to understand that. So what we did in our Be Money Smart Financial Literacy Initiative, we worked with community partners. Locally, we worked with Pennsylvania State Employees Credit Union. We worked with Members First. And we also went across the state, went from Erie, Scranton, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh area, talking to educators, going to schools who in some cases have been teaching financial literacy for over a decade. And we've seen the impact of that, where they have students who, when they graduate, are prepared for the real world. Not only that, a lot of them, and especially in our in populations where there's a language barrier, this child may go home, teach their family about what they've learned in regards to financial literacy. So what it is, it's an initiative to bring awareness to financial literacy, talk about the importance of financial literacy. And in some cases, as far as some of the socioeconomic conditions that are out there, it levels the playing field. And so that's something that we are very passionate about within the department, and something that we're going to continue to do. We're going to continue to be advocates about financial literacy, because in the long run, if you are an adult that really isn't financial literate, then one of our auditors may come see you. It may not, maybe with regards to something that isn't necessarily correct. So it's again, it's an initiative that we started, and bring awareness to it, and it's something that we're going to continue to do.
Thank you. So right now is the initiative in K through 12?
Well, the initiative, we go through K through 12, absolutely. I've read to kindergartners. I've met with high school seniors. I've met with college students. And when I talk to college students, a lot of times I talk about what I do in government. I always leave time for questions and answers. And at the end, the questions are never about what I do as Auditor General. It's about their own personal finance. And that just shows you the importance of financial literacy.
And how many adults can take advantage of this financial literacy initiative as well?
As many as, there's no number.
Okay.
There's no number. And we can talk later, because there's a lot that I want to do with it, with regards to financial literacy. I mean, what we're doing now is just the beginning. It's just the beginning, but there's a lot more that we can do.
Awesome. Thank you, and thank you for your work on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Krupa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. To all our testifiers, Auditor DeFore, it's always good to see you. And I want to thank you for your diligent work in ensuring that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely, fairly, and transparently. The people of Pennsylvania deserve to know that state agencies are following their own rules and making funding decisions based on merit rather than favoritism or politics. Your recent audit of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, uncovered troubling issues with the grant award process, including the department's failure to follow its own policies and the lack of a fully competitive process. I commend you for bringing these issues to light and taking swift action to hold DCNR accountable. Can you elaborate on the most significant ways in which the department failed to follow even its own rules?
Well, thank you for that question. The fact that they didn't follow their own rules, the fact that their rules were circumvented, and whenever you have, every department has rules, policies, and internal controls in place. And you may hear me talk about internal controls because they're extremely important with regards to government operating properly. But when you either don't follow or you circumvent the internal controls, that's when problems start to happen. That's when things are missed, and that's when outside influences can enter in.
Did this particular audit have any indication that the failures resulted in favoritism, conflicts of interest, or inappropriate political influence in the awarding of the grants?
As far as us having direct knowledge, no. However, it led to the possibility of that happening.
Okay. Were there concerns that there was any conduct that could have rose to the level of being criminal or unethical? And if so, were there any referrals from your department to either the Attorney General's office or the Ethical Board?
No, our audit didn't find that. However, I believe on the distribution list, the Attorney General was listed on it.
Okay. How many grant applicants were potentially disadvantaged by DCNR's failure to conduct a fully competitive process?
For that particular number, that'd be a question you'd have to ask DCNR.
Okay. With respect to the specific recommendations that your office has made, DCNR has 120 days, I believe, from February 3rd to indicate whether they're going to adopt the recommendations into practice. What's the process if they refuse to implement any of your recommendations?
I don't believe, with regards to us, I don't believe that there's anything that we can do. Whenever we perform an audit, our obligation stops when we receive that information.
Okay. Does the legislature need to take action to require stricter compliance?
That's up to the legislature, but the legislature could.
Based on your findings, do you believe that this issue is isolated to DCNR, or is there reason to believe that similar issues exist in other state agencies' grant processes?
Really, without looking at those other state agencies, it's really hard to tell.
Does your office plan to conduct follow-up audits to ensure DCNR has corrected these deficiencies, and if so, what's the timeline for that review?
Well, one of the things that is going to happen, there will be a follow-up to this audit, and that audit may come either between, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 or 4 years, which is the normal practice to follow up on an audit.
Okay. These are very serious concerns, and I appreciate your efforts to ensure that taxpayer dollars are handled with integrity. Your audit has raised important questions, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues and perhaps doing a deep dive in the stricter compliance rules. Shifting gears to a different issue with the medical marijuana program, which hasn't been along that long. What type of time frame does that program need to be established and implemented before your office would be able to do a thoughtful audit?
That's a tough question. Again, what we would look at is if there's any type of medical marijuana program that's set up of course we would look at the state dollars, but without really knowing what the program looks like, we really don't know.
So one of the committees I'm on is Health Committee, and there was an issue where there were a few apparently bad actor doctors, and when I say a few, maybe 9 or 12, that were responsible for a huge percentage of the prescriptions for medical marijuana participants or patients. I know that there has been, in Health Committee, we just passed through a bill that would create stricter regulations, but considering the amount of taxpayer money through the Medicaid program that may be paying for that, does that open the door for an audit from your department?
If it's Medicaid, possibly, potentially.
Okay. I see my time has almost stopped. Thank you for being here today and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Mays.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Good morning, General DeFore.
Good morning.
Welcome to your team, and also happy Women's History Month. I understand that your department is responsible for auditing our 25 state correctional facilities, including 23 correctional institutions, 1 boot camp, and 1 training academy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dignity Act for Incarcerated Women, which seeks to bring higher quality of care to female inmates, and for pregnant inmates, making sure they're getting the health care that they need and have access to the resources that they need. My first question is, based on your auditing, are you seeing any financial trends that are promising or troubling when it comes to investments in health care for inmates, and particularly female inmates?
Representative, that is a really good question. That is something I don't believe that we have audited recently. However, I would love to sit down and have that conversation with you. And the reason why is if I want to take a look at, number one, what exactly is being done. Number two, I'm going to take a look at the state dollars and the state resources that are being put into this, and to determine if it is in fact something that we are responsible for, or if there's another agency responsible for, or if we in fact can do it. But one of the things that I can tell you, it's not something that we have done. but it's something I'm definitely interested in talking to you about.
And just for clarity, do you audit the correctional facilities on a yearly basis, or what's the prescription for the audit frequency?
It depends on the program. It depends on the program. Now, there's some programs like the First Chance Fund that is based off of certain Department of Corrections contracts. We audit that every 2 years.
Okay.
But as far as what you are talking about, that's something I'd love to sit and talk to you about.
You know, I know you have a great responsibility in auditing so many different entities and agencies across the Commonwealth. I would like to implore you, when you are auditing our correctional facilities, that we are looking at investments and cost savings and how that may impact care of our inmates. And my second question I have for you is around, you know, models of compassionate medical release. And as my colleague, Rep. Waxman, has been championing the Little Scandinavia Model Prison Project, have you seen any potential for cost savings there in our correctional facilities?
I am not that familiar with the program, but again, something else I'd like to talk to you and to him about.
Okay. Thank you so much, General. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Barton.
Thank you very much, Chairman Harris, and welcome, General DeFore, and your team as well. Thank you for being here. I'd like to follow up on similar vein of questioning as Representative Krupa. Specifically, the Department of Agriculture created a discretionary program last year called the Innovation Development Grant Program. It was appropriated $10 million for fiscal year 24-25, and this year an additional $13 million is being proposed for the program. Just last week, pardon me, at the budget hearing with the Department of Agriculture, Secretary Redding attested that he was receptive to an audit of his department's Innovation Development Grant Program. And it was after I questioned about the transparency of the $10 million being awarded very quickly within a few months. And the program itself is a discretionary program that provides support for innovative agricultural businesses, including energy, conservation, and that's good stuff. But there are concerns with the criteria, scoring, and transparency of such decision-making. So I believe that this program would benefit for a performance audit, and that would be conducted in a similar manner to your department's recent performance audit released on February 13th. So as the full amount of $10 million from fiscal year 24-25 was spent in such a really short period of time, with no oversight and no input from the General Assembly, I guess how is the General Assembly expected to justify additional budget increase without any kind of transparency in the process or decisions being made? It's difficult for us to do that. So with that said, given the Secretary's very openness and to cooperating of ensuring Commonwealth's funds are being properly expended, how would you recommend the General Assembly endorse a performance audit of the Department of Agriculture's Innovation Development Grant Program?
Make a request. Make a request.
And it's that simple?
It's that simple.
Can this be considered the request right now?
Well, we would like a formal request, a little more information.
Sure thing.
So you could make sure that our staff connects with you and your staff, and we could start the process that way.
And like I said, Secretary Redding was very open to it and welcoming it, but it certainly seems sense. It's clear that our job here is to make sure that money's being spent properly and fairly. And is there something that could be done for all agency grant programs to ensure that grants are evaluated in a fair and competitive process and not rewarded based on political influence?
Well, one of the things in something like that can start with the legislature. But as far as looking at how those programs are working, that is something that we can do. Now, we can't we don't have the resources to audit every single one at this current time.
I understand.
But as far as what you're talking about, and I believe you're talking about the Department of Agriculture, that is something that we can definitely sit down and have that conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Khan.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and thank you, General DeFore. It's great to see you. And
Likewise.
Thank you for all your work, for being a trailblazer, and for all that you do for our kids. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. In Philadelphia, I can tell you that our schools, as you probably have seen, we're facing major funding gaps. And in Philadelphia, our county, I think we have about a $1.25 billion funding gap. We have teachers that are teaching in schools where they have lead, mold, asbestos. Some places the ceilings are falling down, and we've been looking for the money. We're trying to get a thorough and efficient education here in the Commonwealth. And it really falls on this body to make sure that we're funding our schools. You recently issued an audit on cyber charter schools. And in that audit, you found that there were 5 charter schools, cyber charter schools, that had amassed about $600 million in their reserves. And in a few years, they had increased their revenues by hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in revenues for just 5 schools. First, can you talk about some of the spending that you saw, because you raised a couple flags in that audit. Can you talk about some of the concerning findings that were legal, but were concerning in terms of spending and in terms of real estate?
Off the top of my head is when a cyber charter schools spends $196 million to either build or renovate 21 buildings. And as I said in the audit report, that's a bit peculiar for a school that is based with online education. And again, all this was able to happen legally because, and as I've said repeatedly, it's an old formula that doesn't necessarily work anymore. It's a funding formula dating back to 2002, before there was an iPhone, before there was an iPad. So we're using a funding formula that is 23 years old. As you know and as I know, anything that's 23 years old, it's going to need to be updated. And if it's not updated, it's going to cause problems. And in this case, the problem that it's causing, it's the taxpayer. So that's why we made the recommendation that we did with regards to fixing that formula. I wasn't the only one. Jack Wagner, 2015 did it. Dean DePasquale did it. So you have 2 Democrats and Republicans basically saying the same thing. When's the last time that happened?
Yeah, and Philadelphia, a lot of people like to rag and hate on Philadelphia. I want to talk a little bit about what our schools are doing, because we have teachers, PFT, we have climate staff, we have paraprofessionals from Unite here that are working hard to make sure that they're improving their outcomes in Philadelphia schools. And just in the last few years, because in part of the investment that this legislator has made in Philadelphia, I think we helped fill in some of that funding gap. I think we increased our spending to about $300 million in Philadelphia over the last couple years to help level up those schools. And we've seen performances increase. With these 5 charter schools that have about $1 billion in revenue, close to, not exactly, but close to $1 billion in revenue, and hundreds of millions of dollars in their fund balance, what did you find in terms of performance and how their students are performing in those key areas?
Well, that's what we, for this audit and other audits that we have done of Philadelphia Cyber Charter School audit and the one that we did of the traditional public school reserves, we didn't look at performance with regards to educating the kids or grades.
My apologies. I apologize. I was referring to the cyber charter audit of those 5 cyber charter schools. Can you talk about what you found in terms of the performances of those 5 schools?
That's something that wasn't included in our audit report. Our audit report, what it was how they were getting their revenue, how they were spending their revenue, and what they had in reserve, and what, in fact, they were doing with it.
I see. I apologize. It looks like there was a review of actually those schools, and it found that they were well behind by a dramatic amount in terms of performance in key areas. Did you see
I believe there was one done, but it wasn't included in this audit report.
Okay, yeah. Despite having hundreds of $millions in reserves and close to $1 billion in revenues, their performance of their students was substantially lower than the average performance. I think there was under 10% in some categories where the average is supposed to be at least 50 or 60%. And actually we want to get to about 70 or 80%. And if my final question for you, General, is can you talk, you talked about this outdated formula, and I think that really falls to our body. Can you talk about just some recommendations that you would have for us in terms of updating this formula?
Bringing all stakeholders together. That means bringing the stakeholders from this body, also bringing the stakeholders, governors, including the governor's office, advocates for cyber charter schools, advocates for traditional public schools, bringing them together to try and hammer out what would be the best path going forward. Because one of the things with regards to all this, we're talking about how schools are funded, but one of the things that we really talk about are the kids that are being impacted by all this. Yeah. And those are the most important ones that we also be considering. But also understand that there is a path out there for everybody, whether you're a charter school, whether you're a cyber charter school, or whether you're traditional public schools. What is the best path for everybody that in the long run is going to help educate our kids?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, General. Appreciate you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for being here this morning. We really appreciate your time answering questions from us. We also, I very much appreciate all of the work you've been doing around transparency and government accountability, since those are areas that are very important to me. In 2020, PHFA was tasked with distributing $175 million in rent and mortgage assistance, and only $54 million was dispersed to homeowners and renters around the Commonwealth. Then in 2021, PHFA was given $350 million in the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA dollars, to create the Homeowners Assistance Grant Program. After 1 year, unfortunately, PHFA shut down the program due to technical issues between itself and a vendor. This past session, I introduced legislation, which was House Bill 2387, to have an independent watchdog, such as your department, investigate them and offer recommendations to improve their programs specifically related to the Penn Homes program. I'm very passionate, as I said, about government transparency and accountability of state and federal dollars, and thankfully your office felt the same that I did. This past October, I was very pleased that your office chose to conduct a performance audit of PHFA with the objectives of assessing PHFA's process for reviewing developer applications and awarding Penn Homes program funds to ensure compliance and any applicable statutes, regulations, executive orders, contractual requirements, guidelines, policies, and procedures, as well as access PHFA's process for monitoring units with Penn Homes funding for compliance. I know your office cannot speak about an audit that's currently being conducted, but I wanted to really just applaud you for your work, and I cannot wait to see the results of what this kind of uncovering might be. As you know, the last time PHFA was audited is speculated to be in the 1980s. But the interesting part when we ask the question is that there's no actual audit report that can be found. So technically it happened, but there's no record of it. So since PHFA was charged with delivering millions of dollars to Pennsylvanians in need, this is all taxpayer dollars, and they failed miserably, I'm anxious to see what your office finds to ensure government transparency and accountability. I know that was more of a statement for me, but I'm just wondering if your office has a statement or anything they would like to say, knowing that you have to be very careful with what you say at this point.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your comments. It's greatly appreciated. At the end of the day, we have one mission: to produce a quality audit report. And I have no doubt once we complete this audit, that's what we'll have.
Well, I greatly appreciate your work. I look forward to reviewing the results of this when it's completed, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General DeFore, for joining us today. Prior to my time in the legislature, I actually worked for the County Controller's Office in Lehigh for 2.5 years, so very appreciative of the work that you did in Dauphin County and recognize the value of our local controllers in the Commonwealth. I want to ask you specifically first about performance audits. I think it's one of the unspoken powers of your office to evaluate the efficacy of government programs. And I want to ask you specifically about potentially performance audit on Act 47. I'm a former city council person in the city of Allentown, and the Pennsylvania Economy League has written quite extensively about some of the deficiencies in our Act 47 program, specifically that it doesn't address the underlying symptoms that are affecting tax distress in our municipalities, namely the fact that our current tax law confines the collection of tax revenue to municipal borders, the necessity of looking at consolidation of services, and just in general the fact that tax bases in many places in Pennsylvania have not grown consistently. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not your office would be interested in a performance audit, or that's something that you've potentially has already come to your attention?
Here's what I will say, and I've said this to others. Let's sit and have that conversation, because I don't want to say yes without researching whether or not we actually legally can do it or somebody else is required to do that work. But I do want to have that conversation with you about that.
Okay, I would appreciate that opportunity. I think it's a program worth further inquiry in. You know, according to the Pennsylvania Economy League, of the 14 cities and boroughs that were in Act 47 for 5 years or more, only one of them actually left with a tax base that was higher than non-Act 47 municipalities at their 2014 level. So I think it shows that it's a valuable program. We need to help local communities. Someone who used to represent and continues in the legislature represent the 3rd largest city in the Commonwealth. I do think we need to have broader conversations about what tools we give our municipalities to make sure they can provide critical local services. And I think as a former controller, you can agree, we do in many ways hamstring our municipalities' ability to support themselves. So I welcome that conversation.
And so do I. Thank you.
My second question is related more overall to just the way we collect revenue in the Commonwealth. We've had a lot of conversations over the course of these 3 weeks in the legislature about this year's budget and budgets moving forward, and we know that Pennsylvania has revenue-related issues as the years move forward. And as you well know, our Constitution specifically has the uniformity clause in it, which prevents our ability to have a graduated income tax. And I would argue that the Pennsylvania Policy and Budget Center shows that we have one of the most regressive tax systems in the country. The bottom 20% of taxpayers pay 2.5 times what the top 1% pays. Would you be interested in evaluating what a graduated income tax in Pennsylvania could raise if we were to remove the uniformity clause?
Again, I'm going to go back to what we legally can do, and our responsibility, according to the Pennsylvania Fiscal Code, is to audit once funds are being spent. As far as doing any type of projection, that's not part of what we are legally entitled to do. Even though it sounds really interesting what you're talking about, that may be a better question for the Office of the Budget. But our function is to look at how taxpayer dollars are being spent, and also if programs funded by the taxpayers are in fact working. So we would not look at any type of projections.
Fair enough. Well, I do welcome the conversation on Act 47, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great to see you, Auditor. Really appreciate your efforts across the state, in leadership to kind of tackle a number of tough issues. And I'd like to touch on 2 connected but very different and controversial issues, and credit to you and your office on both of them. And that's in the area of property taxes and education, both between the public schools and the cyber charter schools. So in 2023, your office conducted a performance audit of 12 selected school districts. And kind of long and short of it, it gets to this issue of reserves, the amount of reserves that certain school districts are. But if I was understanding that correctly, they were in compliance, so it wasn't illegal what was potentially happening, but school districts were holding on to considerable reserve funds, but then going out and requesting to raise taxes above their, what would that be, set allowable limit. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so here's what we discovered in that audit. And again, this is another one of those situations where the same as separate charter schools, things were done legally, but they found loopholes in the law in order to do it. Where school, with regards to the 12 traditional public school reserve audit, what we looked at is if schools were properly utilizing the their general funds, money in their general funds, and properly reporting to the Department of Education that they had, I believe it was 8%.
Yes,
they had 8% of their budget amount in their.
So if we're, you know, and I kind of have some of those summarized facts, but it seemed to me as a property, I mean, 7 kids, they're all going to public schools, but these schools, you know, so 37 out of possible 48 times during a 4-year period. So 77% of the time they were requesting exemptions to increase taxes above the inflationary index while they were sitting on multiple years. So it's not illegal, but it is a practice that...
Because what they were doing, if a school has a certain amount in their general fund, and if 8% of what was budgeted in their general fund, they can apply to the Department of Education for an increase, because that's considered a low amount.
Yeah, and that would be an increase because everyone can do
tax, where they can raise taxes without putting it up.
Yes, yeah, these are bigger increases.
Right, where they could raise taxes without putting it out to the voter.
And I understand, you know, it's important for schools to be able to manage their budgets and hold on to reserves. You know, if we flip over and we look at the cyber charter audit that you had conducted, it was also, you know, really interesting results, which, you know, it looked like they had legally, again, increased reserves by $425 million, because the formula doesn't necessarily drive to instruction costs. It's, you know, it's set up in a different way. So, you know, I'm a big supporter of educational choice as well. Every student should be afforded an equal opportunity to learn regardless of their zip code. But stepping back, and credit to you, it seems like your office highlighted 2 imbalances to maybe drive a very important conversation about school. Ultimately, this is taxpayer dollars, you know, because we have 17 institutions, over $1 billion in taxpayers in reserves. You know.
Yeah, so, and basically in both cases, they found ways around the law. They found, and with the public schools, they found ways around the law to where they could raise taxes without voter input. If they could show that their budgeted amount was below a certain percent. But in addition to that, they then could go to the Department of Education and apply for a referendum to raise taxes above that amount. And all this was legally done. So schools, public schools found a way around that, in the same way that charter schools were using a old, outdated formula, which allowed them to gain more revenue.
Well, and I appreciate and I applaud your courage and leadership, because 2 very powerful groups and controversial issues, but kind of highlighting the need, going back to your recommendation of the best path moving forward for children is to get everybody at the table and let's start balancing, because we have to have reserve funds, but excessive funds or skirting existing tax law to raise property taxes at an over-accelerated rate.
Exactly.
You know, I see where you're going, and I applaud it, so thank you very much.
Because the reserves are meant for emergencies. Let's face it, emergencies happen. So that's why you have reserves, and there's nothing wrong with reserves. We mentioned that in the Auditor report. But when you go way above and beyond what you have in reserves, whether you're on the cyber charter school end of it or whether you're in the public school end of it. All that money is coming from the same pot, and that's the pot of the taxpayer.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Chairwoman Carol Hill Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, General, for being here, and your staff. I appreciate it. And I also want to just say that I really appreciate that you're doing your Be Money Smart program about financial literacy. It's very, very important. And in fact, I have a resolution that will be going out for April recognizing that it is Financial Literacy Month, nationwide as well as here in the Commonwealth. So thank you. I also see on television where they have, I think it's SoFi, Get Your Money Straight or Get Your Money Right. Perhaps you should consider going on television with your program to reach more people. That's how important it is. But my question is simply this: is there anything legislatively that you can think of that we can do to make your program even more well-known, other than just advertising it, to get people to you to hear your message?
Just be an advocate. Right now, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for advocates, looking for, and also to acknowledge some of the schools who have been doing it in some cases for decades. And I was even at the I think it was the YMCA or YWCA in York, talking about it, where they have an after-school program where they're teaching financial literacy. But just being an advocate for it, that's right now the best thing that we could do. And also introduce us to other advocates who we may not be aware of.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Chairman Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. A lot of people in Pennsylvania don't realize that the Auditor General's office is not the entity that does election audits. According to Pennsylvania state law, counties run elections. The Department of State oversees elections from a statewide level, but the state law also requires that counties basically audit themselves. So the people running the elections are the same people that audit how they did. So my question, I realize the Auditor General's office, there's a lot of different things you have to audit based on the current state laws. But if we could change some other laws to free up some time, free up some resources by getting rid of some of the audits that you currently do, or spacing out the time interval of audits or something like that, would your office be open to doing election audits after elections every year?
That's a conversation I'd like to have with you. Because right now, when you talked about us getting rid of some audits, it's not easy as it sounds. Be perfectly honest, there are some things that I would like to be doing, additional things I would like to be doing. I'm not sure if elections is one of them, but I would love to sit down and have that conversation with you about it and to pick your brain as to what you're thinking about.
Well, I would, let's do that. Let's get together and have that conversation. One thing I can think of just off the top of my head, the volunteer fire department relief associations. You have to audit those. Well, some of those departments only get a couple $1,000s a year. It doesn't seem like it's hardly worth the time to audit, whereas other departments get $100,000 a year. That seems like those should definitely be audited. But by law, you have to do what the law says. Correct. So yeah, we need to do that. Now, if you did do election type of audits, would your department have the capability, rather than just auditing this candidate got this many votes, this other candidate got that many votes, would you also be able to audit things like making sure when somebody applies for a mail-in ballot that those voters' names were taken out of the poll book so they can't vote on election day, and auditing, were mail-in ballots sent out by the legal deadline so voters would have time to get them back? Would your office have the capability to audit things like that as well?
It would depend on what the law looks like, and it would depend on the audit requirement. So, and that's why it's difficult for me to say exactly what we would audit when there's so many different variables that go into whether we can, should, or how we would do an audit. One of the things that we have to follow, we have standards that we have to follow. We have to follow the standards by the U.S. Comptroller General of the United States. We have to follow general accepted auditing standards. We have to follow standards by the AICPA. So there's a lot of things, a lot of different variables that we have to consider and that we have to look at before we could actually say, yeah, we could do that.
Okay. Yeah, an example I was thinking of is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like if you audit a school district, rather than just looking at numbers, you can audit things like making sure the bus drivers have commercial driver's licenses and things like that. You guys do more than just look at actual numbers. You look at things also, right?
Right, but when you just mentioned about whether or not bus drivers had the proper certification, that's something that school districts are statutorily required to send to the Department of Education.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. But yeah, I look forward to having a conversation because, in my opinion, I'm just one voice here, audits should be done of things where massive amounts of money are spent. Because if there's even a 0.1% error rate in some line item that's $8 billion or something, that's a lot of money that's being not used properly. But if there's some $5,000 expenditure to audit that, it just doesn't seem like it's a very good.
And that's why one of the things that I mentioned early on, that's why we're starting to audit based on risk. And that's why we're doing the limited procedure engagement audits, the reduced period engagement audits, where we're looking at what are the risks and vulnerabilities to the Commonwealth. And when I talked about transformation, that was part of the transformation, as opposed to just doing audits that, quite frankly, may not make any sense, doing them on a regular basis. We started looking at what are the risks and the vulnerabilities, which is taking our department into a whole new direction.
All right. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to having a good conversation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you. And General DeFore, thank you for being here today. I think that we highlighted today a lot of the good work that you do in your agency. You are the true watchdogs for taxpayer dollars, and we appreciate that. And just to highlight a couple of things, in your first term, 14,000 audits, roughly about 3,500 audits per year.
That's correct.
Just a quick question. I appreciate the sort of in-depth overview of some of the criteria that you provided the chairman, but how many audits do you deny annually?
For that one, I don't have that information in front of me, but we have to deny quite a few.
Okay.
And some of the reasons that we deny them, and I said this earlier, it's based on whether or not we can do them, whether or not we should be doing them. If we can't do an audit based on a law, based on where an auditee, potential auditee receives funding, even if we say we're going to go ahead and do the audit anyway, those individuals that we're auditing, they don't have any responsibility to cooperate with us. So those audits, we can't do those, then we're not. Others, we just simply don't have the manpower in order to do that. Now, the one thing about this department, at one time they may have, at one point this department had close to 1,000 employees. As recent as 2013, it had close to 600. When I became Auditor General, we had 374. So we started and are still in a deficit with regards to the amount of people that we should have that we can't have. So unfortunately, there are some audits because of manpower that we just simply have to turn down.
Well, I think your budget request is quite modest considering the work that you do, how important it is to make sure that we're using taxpayer dollars wisely, to make sure that our agencies and entities are performing to the best of their ability with responsibility to the taxpayer. So I applaud your work. I appreciate what you do. We want to be supportive of that because we want to make sure that we are being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and they are being used in the most effective way possible. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chairman. And with that, we're done. I will say, I think this is the first time that we finished early for any of our budget hearings. So,
I may say you are dealing with an auditor.
Auditor General DeFore, we thank you for being here with us this year. Thank you for your staff. Thank you for your work to the Commonwealth. We will be back this afternoon for our last hearing starting at 1 p.m. We'll be joined by the Secretary of the Budget Office. Until then, these hearings are adjourned.